On the 16th of July, 2022, a crime spree in Missouri ended not with flashing lights or handcuffs, but with one thief, flat on the floor of a Quick Trip store, stopped by a customer who just wanted a bathroom break. As it turns out, convenience stores are only convenient if you're buying a soda, not if you're trying to rob one in a state where half the customers are packing heat. At around 2:58 a.m., 26-year-old Lance Bush walked into a mobile on the run on South 5th Street in St. Charles, Missouri, armed with a knife. He forced the clerk to empty the register, then he took her out back, demanding access to the safe. When she couldn't, he dragged her back, made her open Register 2, grabbed the cash, and fled. The clerk ended up in hospital with some minor injuries, but Bush, however, was running a tight schedule and hadn't stuck around. Police were rushing to the first scene when, at around 3:14 a.m., another alarm went off at the Midtown Phillips 66 on First Capitol. By the time they arrived, the suspect was gone, leaving only broken glass, missing cash, and more questions. 2 stores back-to-back in just 16 minutes. He may have been underarmed, but his time management was flawless. However, that flawless schedule didn't last long. At 3:20 a.m., another call came in, this time from the Quick Trip on First Capitol. By coincidence, another 26-year-old, Christopher Dandridge Jr., had just stopped there to use the bathroom and grab a drink. He was heading back to his car when a black Toyota Highlander tore into the lot, and Lance Bush jumped out. Dandridge grabbed his gun and followed him in. According to police, Bush was threatening the clerk with a knife, and when Dandridge confronted him, Bush clutched his backpack and declared, "I have something for you." Turns out, the only thing he had to offer was live target practice. Dandridge fired his gun, hitting the unprepared robber several times. Bush was taken to the hospital, but died later. Police traced his vehicle to an armed robbery the night before and found stolen items inside. His crime spree had lasted less than half an hour. In the end, his biggest mistake wasn't poor planning. It was attempting to rob Missouri convenience stores, where the customers are usually better armed than the robbers. This next story is an honourable mention, as the main star managed to get away with their brush with Darwin, but it's a story worth telling. On the 10th of April 2009, crowds at the Berlin Zoo gathered to watch the polar bears being fed. Among them was a woman who decided that the best view wasn't from the fence, but inside the enclosure. It was feeding time at the zoo, which meant she wasn't just watching the meal, she was almost a part of it. Polar bears, unlike brown and black bears, don't settle for the bluff charge. If they see you, and they can reach you, you're going to be their lunch. Adults weigh up to 1,700 pounds, swim for days at a time, and run extremely fast. Their claws are sharp enough to grip ice, they can tear through seal blubber, and their diet is almost entirely meat. In some parts of northern Canada, people are required to leave their car doors unlocked, not for the thieves, but so anyone can jump in if attacked by a polar bear. It's one of the few places where car theft is less of a concern than becoming dinner. This is all to say, polar bears are not to be messed with. On the 10th of April 2009, families pressed against the barriers at Berlin Zoo, watching a family of 4 polar bears eat their lunch. It came as a shock when a 32-year-old woman, identified only as Mandy due to European privacy laws, for reasons still not entirely clear, treated the "Do Not Enter" sign as more of a suggestion and climbed into the enclosure. It was feeding time, and she had delivered herself straight to them. For the polar bears, it looked less like a break-in and more like day 1 of live feeding. After swimming toward them, one of them took an interest and took a bite at her backside. Staff threw in life rings, tossed meat, and poked the bears with poles, trying to hold them off. Mandy grabbed one of the life rings and was halfway to rescue when she lost her grip and fell back in, and her poor backside took another hit. Eventually, though, she was pulled to safety, and the bears were denied their surprise entree. Mandy was rushed to hospital with wounds to her arms, hips, and butt, and was eventually fined for trespassing. She walked away with wounds, a police citation, and the rare honor of being the only Berlin Zoo visitor to almost be eaten alive and still have to pay for the privilege. Derek Keeper thrived on debate. He was loud, opinionated, and never afraid to push back against rules he didn't like. But in the end, one rule he ignored wasn't decided in a courtroom or on a campus floor, rather on an icy highway, and physics made the final argument. At the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Derek made himself heard. He wrote columns in the Daily Nebraskan, the university's student newspaper, and they often sparked heated letters to the editor. Friends described him as a gentle giant, but one who thrived on provocation. He was political, rebellious, argumentative, and provocative, someone who made his opinion known. According to his fraternity brothers, if Derek had an idea, the room was going to hear it, whether it wanted to or not. Gravity, as it turned out, had the same approach. One of his firmest beliefs was his loathing for seatbelt laws. In a 2004 column he wrote for the Daily Nebraskan, he argued that stricter laws would not change behavior, saying, "As laws become increasingly strict for seatbelts, there seems to be a die-hard group of non-wearers out there who simply do not wish to buckle up no matter what the government does. I belong to this group." To be fair, he probably didn't mean the obituary section, but seatbelts don't care about politics or arguments. On the 4th of January 2005, just after 3 a.m., Derek was riding home with two friends on Interstate 80 outside Lincoln on their way back from winter break. After hitting a patch of ice, their Ford Explorer lost control and rolled several times into the ditch. While the other two walked away, Derek got to fly out the window that was. His friends, both strapped in with their seatbelts, survived with only minor injuries. Derek, unbuckled in the back seat, was thrown from the vehicle and killed. This final story is a last-minute replacement to a different story that I thought was more interesting than it was. But anyway, it's a classic case of mess around and find out. On the 25th of December 2007, 17-year-old Carlos Souza Jr. was at the San Francisco Zoo with his two brothers. They stayed behind after closing and went to the tiger enclosure. There, inside the enclosure, was a 350-pound Siberian tiger held behind a 12.5-foot wall, which was well short of the Zoo Association's recommended minimum of 16.5 feet. In front of the wall was a moat that the San Francisco Zoo had intended to hold water, however, it was empty. According to an eyewitness, the boys began taunting the tiger, throwing objects, and shouting at it until they got a reaction. And a reaction they got. Enraged by the taunts, it leapt across the moat, jumped up, clawed its way over the 12.5-foot barrier, and proceeded to attack the three boys. Although she went first for his brothers, Carlos, in an effort to save them, attempted to fight it off, but suffered unsurvivable injuries to his neck. The two brothers, left injured, scrambled to a zoo cafe before officials arrived, opened fire, and killed the tiger. In the aftermath of the incident, the inevitable lawsuits followed. The brothers received $900,000 from the San Francisco Zoo, while their parents settled for an undisclosed amount for the death of Carlos. Following his death, the zoo increased the tiger enclosure to 16.5 feet, added electrified wire, installed speakers to remind guests of closing time, and added new signs telling people not to taunt the tigers. That's all the stories for today's video. If you enjoyed, I'd love it if you subscribed and joined me for the next one. To watch another of my Darwin Award videos, you can click the link on screen. And as always, thanks for watching.